men have lost their masculinity and women have gained their masculinity.
That's one way to describe women gaining access to their own independence, to have choice on how they wish to live their own lives and don't have to be forced to be financially dependent on a man. And I guess men have lost a lot of accessibility to force women to settle in relationships with them because they're financially dependent on them.
My problem is that I've realized that people say masculinity is toxic.
I have a strong hunch what he's about to do is bring up a characteristic that we continue to associate with masculinity that nobody has ever equated to toxic masculinity.
You work, right? Mm-hmm. You make your own money.
I make my own money.
What did I tell you? The Brofessor is incredibly predictable.
And since there was no men around you, you had to went into your masculine energy in order to make money to provide to yourself.
What era of time is your mentality living in? It's not that women wanted to go out and make their own money for themselves. No, they were forced to. They didn't have a choice. There were no men around to make it for them. If the whole notion of this idea of being in your masculine energy, being masculinity, which continuously gets defined as roles, attributes, and behaviors associated with men and boys, it stands to argue that making money and providing for yourself isn't a masculine trait. Because lo and behold, to no surprise, women can make their own money themselves as well. A woman making her own money and providing for herself is not her in her masculine energy. She's just an adult. I'll give you another example. Women lifting weights in the gym and building muscle continues to get equated as being in your masculine energy and as a masculine trait. And if masculinity is defined by roles, behaviors, and attributes we only associate with men and boys, the endless amounts of women who lift weights in the gym and build muscle, doesn't that stand to reason that lifting weights and building muscle isn't a masculine trait? It's simply a healthy activity that you pursue in order to optimize a healthier lifestyle. All I got rid of was masculinity and just made it gender neutral and inclusive. Because if you actually live in the reality of the world and not the made up fantasy land of polarity energies, that's all it is.
You never hear a man going into his feminine energy to make it in life.
I'll give you another example. A man who nurtures his children, hugs his children, plays with his children. If we choose to associate what I just mentioned as feminine, which is associated with women and girls, doesn't it stand to reason that everything that I just mentioned is not a man in his feminine energy? It's a man who's a caring, loving, supporting parent. Endless men love to equate a woman cooking and cleaning for him as being in her feminine energy. However, men are more than capable of cooking and cleaning in their households, which stands to reason to suggest that cooking and cleaning in your household is not being in your feminine energy. It's just contributing equally to the domestic labor of the household. The fact it seems that a woman can cook, clean, and take care of her own children in her own household, that's her and her feminine energy. But if she goes outside of the home and pursues a career as a chef, housekeeper, or a childcare worker, she's now in her masculine energy. She's essentially doing the exact same thing, except in one instance she's been paid by an employer, and the other she's just fulfilling the role as a responsible parent. What if she does volunteer work at a homeless shelter where she cooks and cleans, or an orphanage where she looks after kids? Where is her energy on the polarity scale now?
You have to go into your masculine energy.
If we really followed the guidelines of this definition of masculinity and only pick things that we can only associate with men and boys, being in your masculine energy is getting kicked in the nuts.
The truth is, when a woman goes into her masculinity to make it in life,
and the main issue I take with all of this polarity crap is the societal conditioning, because it is a social construct. It's made up. It's not real. You don't go to your GP and get blood work done to see if you're deficient in masculine energy. It's as real as believing in the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. In fact, I've seen Santa Claus in the shopping mall. To me, he's more of a real concept than masculine energy is. It's the continual use of these terminologies used to shame people out of doing certain things because it doesn't align with this made-up social construct of what it means to be a man or a woman. Because even though these types of people will always say that masculine and feminine energies are in both men and women and it's totally normal, a woman in her masculine energy and a man in his feminine energy is always painted negatively. To the extent that people will call a woman a masculine woman or a man a feminine man with the intention of it as an insult. Because if I can continue to prove that anything that gets associated with either masculinity or femininity, that both men and women possess the capability to be able to attribute themselves to either of these things, which remember, by definition, things we associate with boys and men, things we associate with girls and women, does it stand to argue that none of it is masculine or feminine? The true definition in my mind of a woman in her feminine energy would be a woman going through childbirth, having a period, or going through menopause. Because by definition of femininity, those things can only be associated with girls and women.
it explains that masculinity is essential for survival. Wouldn't you agree?
Agree.
Access to food, water, shelter, and an ability to protect yourself against danger and harm's way are actually the essentials for survival. Choosing to associate those real things with a made-up social construct you call masculinity doesn't equate to masculinity being essential for survival.
Which means that it can never be toxic, can it?
I know, it's not.
He didn't debunk toxic masculinity, let's get that clear. So you see, women can go out and make their own money these days, which I equate to them being in their masculine energy, because I've based my entire identity around believing in the made-up fantasy land of polarity crap, instead of just living in the real world and reality where she is just an adult. Thus proves to me, because I believe in the masculinity, femininity crap that is a made-up social construct, it is made up, it is not real, that in my mind, masculinity is essential and can never be toxic. In spite of me only using an example that we choose to associate with masculinity, that nobody is equated to toxic masculinity. I am the Brofessor, I am super smart, and I hope the woman sitting across from me who's blindly agreeing with me because I've probably paid her to, will touch my pee-pee. The fascinating thing for me, when I've been so vocal and open about my general dislike of all this polarity stuff, I then have people tell me I'm a role model for positive, healthy masculinity. I'm apparently more masculine than people who base their entire life around it, even when I trash it and want nothing to do with it. And the men that I see that get offended and hurt and triggered and upset about the concept of toxic masculinity is the men who've incorporated this made-up concept of masculinity as a strong part of their identity. So whenever someone says masculinity is toxic, toxic masculinity, in their mind it's attack on them as a person. You believe they're having a go at you as the individual because you've embodied masculinity as part of your identity, and they're saying it's toxic. They're implying you're a toxic person. But are you? If you're not, great. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. And if I can be honest, my only reason I don't like it is because I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. However, I'm not going to stand here and say it doesn't make sense to anyone else, because it obviously does. I've met plenty of people who've used it as a guide in their lives, and they seem like happy, content, grounded, calm, loving people. If you're able to incorporate it into your life and it contributes to you being a productive member of society and being a good human, I've got no beef with you as an individual. God bless you for figuring out how to make it work. Carry on, keep going. I only started openly talking about it because I wasn't sure anyone else saw what I was seeing. And now that I've discovered that there are people who can understand where I'm coming from, I don't feel as isolated. I don't need masculine energy or masculinity in order to be a man. And I don't think women need femininity or feminine energy to be women. I wish to be free from endless societal conditioning that doesn't serve me and outdated made-up social constructs that don't make any sense anymore. And can people stop acting like this is the only optimal way to operate living your life accordingly? What works for me might not work for you, and what works for you might not work for me, and we would both be right.